because, try as you might, they are more perishable. In any case, and when I did the lemon, I also used this for the zest. And the way that works is this. If you're going to use the juice and the rind, both, you take the zest off the lemon, same deal, just like this. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, 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 real easy. And then you roll the lemon really hard on the surface of the table. Cut it in half, and you can use...
It's over there.
Is it over here? No?
No, I mean,
This.
here.
Something like this to get the juice out. There are all kinds of gadgets out there designed for limes, lemons, oranges, all different sizes, one for each kind. You can fill the drawer full of gadgets to get juice from something. This works just fine. Ream out the thing and you can really get out and get all the juice. And then pour it through a little sieve to get the seeds from the lemon out. It's not very hard.
That thing works for all of them.
Yeah, this works for all of them. You got it.
When you live in galley kitchen, when you live in an apartment with a tiny kitchen.
Certainly not room for 3 different versions of juicers. That's what's in this salad. Spread. Filling. It's like, when is a soup stew, you know? A lot of stuff's the same. We give it different names to meet our expectations, how we're going to use it. In this case, how we're going to use this filling. It's juicy, it's really moist, but it's not runny. You can actually spread it on things. You can fill sandwiches. You could probably put it out in a bowl and just have people dip things in it. You know, it really tastes good. It also has mint and parsley. So there's a lot of ingredients here, but they're all pretty easy to deal with. I encourage you to look at that kind of thing. The recipe's on that sheet, which is over here. If anybody needs to leave early, make sure you get one of those. We're going to dish this out onto some little blue corn chips. I thought blue corn tortilla chips would be a perfect kind of fusion thing to do with this otherwise Middle Eastern, Indian, Spanish compostable thing here. Why not acknowledge the roots of some of it from, you know, the new world, like the avocados and things, you know. So this is going to go on these little chips, and you'll each get to taste that. And we're coming down the line here. While this is being served, I want to talk about chocolate. You know, one of the basic food groups. This is what it looks like if you buy it not messed around with. It's a block of chocolate. Okay? When Hernando Cortez arrived in the Americas, he found the upper class Aztecs drinking a ceremonial liquid made from cocoa beans and chili peppers. Imagine. And it didn't have sugar and milk in it. Okay? Well, it was a religious ritual. The cocoa bean was so valuable that the peasants didn't drink it or eat it at all. They used it for money. As the Mayans and the Toltecs before them. This is a very ancient thing, highly valued. The Westerners were mystified, to say the least. But they took it, as they took everything, back to where they came from, and then messed around with it. They took the chocolate, and they added wine and sugar and all kinds of weird things to it, and forgot the chilies. It's a shame, because chilies and chocolate go really well together. I mean, one legend says when Cortez came to meet with the Aztecs, he asked for gold and was shown cocoa beans, okay? Sometimes they added flowers or vanilla beans. The natives here messed around with it in really interesting ways, and that gave me courage to mess around too. So, chili peppers. I didn't just use chilies. I used freshly grated ginger, I talked about, which comes from China, and smoked paprika, which comes from Spain. It seemed to me, if you just put all this stuff together. Here's a couple of chilies that I want to talk to you about, because ancho chilies and poblano chilies, right? You take a look at that recipe sheet. Could you hand me one of those?
Yep.
Somebody got this one.
Yeah.
You'll see that, no, I meant serve it.
Yes, we're doing.
Right. On the recipe sheet, it tells you that chipotle, which are these things, they're dried, are actually smoked jalapenos. And the anchos are dried poblanos. Right? Who would figure this out, you know? Only people who are conversant with about 100 different kinds of these things, where they use them all the time. But there are endless varieties, and smoking them and drying them really makes a difference. The poblanos are not spicy. They're a very mild chili pepper. They just give depth. And the other ones are really spicy. The chipotle are like, woohoo, they're out. So in entire double batch of brownies, there's a half a teaspoon of that. You won't hardly notice it. There'll be a little bit of a glow somewhere. This is all I wanted it to be. I wasn't interested in, you know, making people run screaming for the water fountain. There's also cinnamon. And there is freshly ground cumin. If you thought the curry was interesting to smell, this will really change your mind about grinding your own spices. The coffee grinder. I never use it for coffee. I always use it for spices. I ground the dried chilies up in this, and this is the cumin, which I want you to smell. Except that the outlet doesn't seem to be working. It's not plugged into the outlet. All right, all set up, and then neglected the last little bit.
Turn it on.
Man. Sound harmless enough, right? These are cumin seeds. Most spices come by way of seeds. If you've ever gotten a whole nutmeg and used it on the microplane, you know what freshly ground nutmeg smells and tastes like. It's incomparable. It's totally different than the stuff that's pre-ground in a jar.
Robert, can I ask you a question?
Yes?
This woman is asking how much onions are in this.
There is 1 cup of red onion in the entire thing.
How big are the pieces?
Very tiny.
And if you want any more of the slaw, we have plenty of that for seconds.
Here you go.
After the fact.
Pass it around. This is cumin. Smell.
But we're just going to do one at a time for now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And you still have your forks. If you don't have enough chips, then you can use your forks for this. We're just trying to do the best we can.
Pass this around.
Looking at the different names for these chilies reminded me of another thing that people are. Yes?
You're using the coffee grinder to grind the spices. How often you clean it between the spices?
Between every time. Every time I change what spice I'm using. It's not hard to clean. Just wipe it out.
And you just wipe it out.
I just wipe it out. It's
With a
stainless
clean
steel
rag.
piece inside, so you can even run it under the water if you want. It's fine. Very forgiving.
But then dry it out.
Oh yeah. Mushrooms, which are not in the brownies.
Thank you. I was just gonna say.
You'll go to the store and you get these white button mushrooms. They are immature mushrooms.
And when they grow up.
When they grow up, they get brown, and then they're called crimini. And when they get to be wise elders, they're called portobellos. It's the same mushroom. The same way a green pepper is an unripe pepper and will turn color if you let it sit on the vine long enough. They come in different colors,
Like glue.
but they will turn color. They are, green is not red. It's like a green banana. But yeah, so button mushrooms, crimini mushrooms, portobello mushrooms, same thing. Just different stages of life. So, while you're smelling the cumin, which is a real treat, here's some other tips about making brownies. The age-old controversy is chewy or cakey. What kind of brownie do you like? Huh?
Chewy.
Right, well, it's really up to you. And I like my brownies to lean on the chewy side myself, but if you want them a little cakier than what you'll get in a minute, you simply add a little more flour and a little bit of baking powder to give it some lift. So they're not quite so fudgy. It's really simple. That's all it takes. A little bit more flour and a little bit of baking powder, and you can experiment on how cakey you want them, but otherwise the recipe is the same. And there's the history of chocolate, but then there's the reality of chocolate. Let me tell you that if you're going to go to the trouble of buying chocolate and chopping it up and melting it and doing all that stuff, you should get good chocolate. Get something that's at least 60% cacao. Anything less than that, you may as well take cocoa out of the can. And I've used some cocoa from the can in this recipe as well, but it's mostly, the good stuff. How do you melt chocolate?
Microwave.
Without burning the chocolate. Double boiler. But do not go out and buy a double boiler if you don't have one. Just take this and put it on top of a pot that has water in it. This is what they do in restaurants. They don't have double boilers. The mixing bowls take care of everything. Don't let it touch the water. That's the trick, or it's too hot. Over simmering water. Chop up that chocolate. You can use the same knife and just takes a bit of work. Just shave it in pieces, put it in here, and watch it melt. This particular set of brownies has a chocolate buttercream icing on it with some cinnamon and freshly grated ginger and a little cumin, but not the chilies. But you can also make something which is called a ganache. There are sort of standard ratios in cooking, which I think are really important and useful. If you're making a vinaigrette dressing, it's 3 parts oil to 1 part acid. That's the rule. If you're making a cake or a quick bread or whatever you want to call that, it's for every cup of flour, it's a teaspoon of baking powder. You just kind of know this stuff after a while because it's like, have you ever noticed where almost every recipe you read says preheat your oven to 350 degrees?
Yeah.
I mean, there are a few that are 325 and a few that are 400, but mostly it's 350 degrees. They're standards. If you want to make something different than a buttercream, and you can make this ganache, which is also really simple. It's 2 parts melted chocolate to 1 part cream. That's it. Melt the chocolate, heat the cream up, and dump the shaved chocolate into the hot cream and take it off the heat and watch it melt. Icing. Like, a little runnier than the buttercream. Doesn't hold a shape quite as neat, but it's really good and it's really easy. This one's got, butter and confectioner's sugar and all those other things. If you do the ganache, you need to have chocolate that's at least semi-sweet. If you buy baking chocolate without any sugar in it at all and just add it to cream, well, you can imagine what you'll get. But I would avoid using the microwave, and I would avoid putting chocolate in a pan over correct flame. That's just a recipe for ruining really good chocolate. Okay. We're going to dish out some brownies. And I hope you'll like these. They've been done a couple of different places now, at a farmer's market, and at an arts fair, and at a bookseller's fair.
That's Sour Market.
And everybody really liked them. Maybe it was just free food, but they really did enjoy them. And so one of the things I was looking at when I was thinking about doing tonight was, all right, you don't know what the weather will be.
Is this,
I can't, I have to have things which don't have to have refrigeration right away.
is this the sling?
Yes, you can lift that whole thing right out.
Because I just went,
Yep.
and it didn't feel like it was gonna have
Yeah.
a hole.
Should,
It's,
the torn, okay, so, all right.
it's
So,
not a sling.
well, it was, it has been in the past.
Okay, I can get a start.
You can get a
That's all
start,
I
right,
need.
right.
That's all I need is a start.
Where's the tray?
I don't know, I'm looking for the tray, but I don't see the
Tray with the other stuff on it, where did it go? Brownie
Oh,
bottom.
can you take those and give them to your colleagues? Because I want the tray just for the brownies.
I can take these off and give them to you. I'll get in
Okay.
trouble if I can reach
Okay, sorry. Well, I was
Here's
hoping.
another tray, okay.
I was hoping. That's okay, I'll take this. These are small.
We're offering, Matt, we're offering these things to you folks.
I know, but
Pass them
I'll
around.
run some downstairs.
It seemed to me this is a good time to ask if any of you have questions about what I've been talking about here or showing, or any other questions about food. Yes?
Okay, so I tried that dip that you made at the farmer's market that I thought was guacamole, and it wasn't. It was this really great stuff. But that's different than this, right?
Yes,
It's
very different.
Right,
The
right.
thing I made for the farmer's market was a combination of hummus and pesto.
That's what I always
I realized that half the ingredients overlapped. I thought, why not? I basically took a good hummus recipe and added pine nuts and basil. Because the hummus already had the lemon and the garlic and the olive oil.
And
So
these are in your cookbook.
all the rest, aren't
the
they?
spiced brownies in the cookbook. These other, and there's another version of Asian slaw in the cookbook. The chickpea thing that went around is not in the cookbook. I just made that up for tonight.
Oh,
What's
so
your
you're getting an
category, David?
exclusive, people. You're getting an exclusive for coming next.
This is a plastic product.
Plastic.
You can scrub it. You can really scrub it on like a wooden cutting board, which I also have a big one at home. But,
Too heavy to transport.
well, yes, well, I think it was too heavy to transport. But this also has little sucker things on the bottom so it doesn't slide around. If you don't have a cutting board with that kind of thing on the bottom, a trick is take a towel, get it slightly damp, and put it on the table with your cutting board on top of that. It won't slide. Yeah, anything else? Questions about food in general, as well as the food here?
You know, the little thing you put in the poppers to rearrange things, what do you call it, the wand?
Yes.
What's the best make, or what do you recommend?
I already put
Yes,
it in the bottom.
that's right. The best that I've seen is the same one that I would recommend for the food processor, which is Cuisinart. They're really sturdy, but you can find decent ones that are pretty cheap too.
I have a Krups that I've had for 15 years, and I've never had trouble
Right.
with it.
The
Krups
wand.
brand,
Wand.
wand, immersible blender.
Yes,
And
Bob?
it's usually gotten high points on Consumer Reports, which is like my pseudo Bible.
Yes, John?
You're still soliciting questions, are you?
Yes?
Indian cooking. I've heard of a spice called garam masala.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could just briefly describe the difference between that and curry.
Right, different bunch of spices. Same, it's a combination of stuff. It isn't an ingredient. The thing is, if you look at different recipes, you won't be able to tell which is which if you didn't have the title on top. Because everybody makes garam masala differently, as well as making curry differently. It's not it often differs from just one town to the next, or region to region. So there's not a fixed rule for all these different spices.
But they're used mainly for savory dishes
Yes.
in India. That's
Yes. But what's a savory dish?
okay.
Laura?
So I have a question about the wand.
Yes.
Is it as powerful as the food processor is? Or does it require?
It's more like a blender than a food processor.
Okay, so it requires kind of things that are more cooked or softer in order
Yeah.
to be pure?
Actually, I wouldn't grind nuts with it, for instance.
Okay.
Whereas the food processor will take care of anything. The blade is smaller, much like in a blender.
some of them have small food processor attachments.
Yes, I've seen them. You can get multi-purpose gadgets which have, do everything. Anything else? Questions about food in general, as well as the stuff here? Well,
What's your stand on genetically modified food?
my stand on it?
Yeah.
I like to know what I'm eating. I'm not being flip. One of the problems with the genetically modified food is that they don't tell you. And there have been a lot of lobbies making sure we don't know what we're eating. Because they know we won't eat it if we know what it is. The biggest problem with genetically modified food, as far as I can tell, is that the science is very inexact, and so there's crossover stuff going on. If you have an allergy to corn, and they take some of the genes from the corn plant and put it into something else because it makes that plant better, you're likely to have an allergic reaction to something you didn't know you were allergic to. And since you don't know, there's no warning. It's like now you see things saying this product was made in a plant where sometimes peanuts are processed. So basically beware. They may not have any peanuts in it, but maybe there is a trace, and if you're highly allergic, you need to know that. And that's one of the things. There's a lot of cross-genetic stuff going on here that's not being regulated, and people are not being told. So I think there's an immediate health risk. Down the pike, there's probably nutrition issues as well. It's a little bit the same kind of thing as most domesticated animals are not fed what they would normally eat. Cows and chickens that wander in the yard and eat bugs and grass and other things like that are very different animals than those that are fed oats and corn, which are not what they're made, their bodies are not made to digest those things. If you're a meat eater, beef that's been grass-fed is totally different than the other stuff. It just tastes better. But I also just think it's nicer to the animals to give them what they're built for. I mean, yeah.
If you find colored vegetables, bouquets of colors, carrots or of tomatoes, potatoes, that you've never seen before.
Colors that you don't associate with that particular food?
Right, but they package them all together now. I think that carrots are called heirloom carrots.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, some of them are just old things that have gone out of fashion, and they're finding seeds and creating them again, like the purple cauliflower, which is beautiful to look at, and it's natural. They haven't done anything really weird. It's just not a variety that was selling, so they dropped it. Now they're bringing back this beautiful yellow-orange cauliflower and this purple cauliflower, and heirloom tomatoes, which have purple and brown and green and all kinds of wonderful stuff in them. I think it's the same as, there was a long time you couldn't get parsnips in the store because they'd gone out of fashion. Who's had a parsnip lately? Oh, great, hooray, I was so glad. Because they're sweeter than carrots. And they're just absolutely wonderful. But most people do not grow up with them. Ta-da, John?
Just a comment with regard to vegetables, and I think this is a group of folks that are probably more knowledgeable than your average people about foods.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking about vegetables and the oddly colored vegetables, most vegetables you buy in the supermarket were developed and hybridized, and so that they would be able to store them and transport them long distances. They were not developed for optimum flavor and nutrition.
Which is why we run into the other problem, which is that food is picked before it's ripe in order to be shipped great distances to us. It doesn't taste the same. I was the cook at an educational institute called Pendle Hill outside of Philadelphia for many years, and we had a very huge garden. And when the corn came in, We would put these giant pots of water on the stove and wait until the water was boiling. Then a whole team of people would descend on the garden, pick the corn, and return with another army of people waiting for them to shuck the corn and throw it into the hot water, you know, like within minutes of being picked. Before the sugar turns to starch. You can't get that in a supermarket. It's not possible to get it there fast enough. You know, a few hours later and you're eating starch. They taste good, but it's totally different. The corn that comes right out of the garden, you can eat without cooking. It's that tender and sweet.
Yeah. So we just got back from Italy, and it was like I'd never tasted food before, and everything was so fresh, and the fruit tasted just, I mean, it was heavenly. It was just amazing. So we decided that we were going to stop using our food delivery program that we were doing, and we were going to go to Whole Foods and pick stuff out. But it's not even as good.
Even then.
It's not as good as what we had. So what do you suggest? Because we can't grow our own stuff.
That's growing your own. That's where you were. That's what people were doing. They were growing this.
No, we don't have gardens.
I know. Well, container gardening. You can do gardening.
Or you go to the farm.
Or go to the farm, right.
You get it delivered, in a CSA box.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
When I went to Paris the very first time a million years ago, the market, which was used by restaurateurs and everybody, was actually brought into the city in the middle of the night. And so if you got up early, like 5 o'clock in the morning, or 4 o'clock, and went down into the center of Paris, all the shops there had opened their doors, like the walls collapsed and there was all this produce and fish and everything, all just picked the night before kind of thing, you know. And that's the food you would be eating in the restaurants that day. Nothing had ever been in a refrigerator. And I remember sitting down to a meal in a cafeteria kind of restaurant. You didn't get an individual table. You know, they had tables, and people just sat where there was an empty chair. And every once in a while, somebody would come through and throw sawdust on the floor, and at the end of the day, they'd sweep it all up. It was rustic. The food tasted like I had the same reaction you had. It was like, this is what a tomato tastes like. They had on the menu something they called salade du tomate. It's actually in the cookbook because it's so simple I couldn't believe it. They sliced a tomato, put it on a plate, sprinkled a little lemon juice and some fresh herbs on it, and let it sit covered at room temperature for an hour. So the slice of tomato opened up and absorbed all that flavor of the fresh herbs. And that was it. There was nothing else. There was no lettuce under it or anything. It was just sliced tomatoes with some seasoning. And I was like, So, and everything was like that. Every single thing was like I'd never eaten it before. When I went to a farm once in Oregon, these were homesteaders. They were growing all their own food. In the morning, I had toast, which was made from whole wheat, which had been ground the night before. I had eggs that had been removed from under the chicken before I got up. You know, every single thing. The apple juice was just pressed at that moment. You know, every single thing was like this heightened flavor. And I thought, okay, I've just never eaten before. You know, I don't know what this stuff I've been putting in my mouth is, but these things were wonderful. And yeah, so the fresher you can get,